The subject tonight is the Republic of South Africa. Now, I know when those words are spoken, all kinds of images are brought to our minds, some bad, some good, but tonight we're going to try and deal with some reality of the situation from an admitted biased viewer, but at least an informed one, the ambassador to the United States from South Africa, Ambassador R.F. Botha. It's B-O-T-H-A, but the H is silent.
That's correct.
Dutch?
Yes.
That's a Dutch name? Or?
Originally Dutch,
Originally,
yes, but it's today a peculiar South African name. It was made there.
Really?
Yes.
And you were born and raised in South Africa?
Oh yes, oh yes. My ancestors came, I think, around about 1658.
Well, now, you know, we Americans seem to have a feeling that Rhodesians and South Africans, somehow it's not their land, if you know what I mean,
yes.
The Black Africa concept.
Yes, no, I'm painfully aware of this lacuna, this gap, if I may call it that
Sure.
way, and I sometimes get the impression that the gap is widening, if I may use that expression, because the way things are presented here simply miss some of the basic historic points. We've been there 300 years, as long as you've been in this country.
Yes.
And we have had very much the same history in many respects, except you won your war against the British and we lost ours. And,
well, I must say, I want you to appreciate, at least I accept the irony of this, because the American Indians could very well make the same kinds of demands that are being made in Africa today of us, by way of saying, look, we were here first, you came here and made this, but still our country,
sure.
and we want it back now.
Sure, sure.
We want to run the government.
Well, an interesting figure is this. When you came here, there were quite a number of million Red Indians in this country. I don't know how many are left today. When we got to South Africa, there was not near 500,000 blacks. Today there are 17 million. I think this shows quite a big difference in the way things were handled.
Okay, now let's talk about some of the negatives that we all live with when we think of South Africa. Apartheid, the concept of separation of the races. Is there separation of races in South Africa?
Yes, there is discrimination. There is discrimination based on color. And on color alone. I must admit that it's no good beating about the bush. This is the truth. But it has an historical base, not a racialistic base, not in the sense of superiority or of being better, or of the blacks being inferior and the whites being better. It's not the case at all. And this is where the greatest misunderstanding, I think, arose inside this country because of your experience with what happened here. Blacks came to this country as slaves.
Right.
They didn't come here as nations, as peoples, talking their languages, practicing their cultures. And they went through a very tragic experience until eventually they obtained liberty and full civil rights. In South Africa and in Africa, black peoples live as nations. And somehow many Americans don't seem to be able to grasp this.
Well, now, what do you mean, live as nations?
Well, it's their continent. They are like the Dutch in Europe, or the French, or the Germans. I mean, there is practicing their customs, their systems, etc., and we consider ourselves white Africans, for instance, and we consider ourselves entitled to our way of life and to our norms and standards and systems.
But it is fair to state, isn't it, that the white people generally rule at least South Africa.
Yes, that's the way it is put across, but we realize you cannot dominate other people. You're looking for trouble if you try to do that. We who are down there surely would be very much aware of the danger of even thinking that you can forever dominate and rule other people. That's why we have evolved a policy of what we call multinational development, granting to each nation the fullest right to become completely independent in the fullest sense of the word. And we have proved it. Transkei became independent last year, where 3 million blacks became independent now with their own president, prime minister, cabinet and parliament.
You know, the image we have, though, and I want to see if you agree with this image, is that the Republic of South Africa is a rich, beautiful nation, basically run by a handful of white people, dominating the blacks, using them as almost chattel property, then sending them off at sundown to live somewhere else in a ghetto. Now, you dispute those.
Of course I dispute it. I think it is inexcusable that the facts concerning my people have been so distorted for so many years. in the outside world. I wish I could take your whole Congress to my country. I wish I could take all black leaders to my country to go and show them myself. I mean, we have in South Africa 4 million black children at school, which is, on a per capita basis, double the average for Africa. The wages of Africans in the Johannesburg area is 80% higher than the wages in Ghana, and the wages in Ghana is the highest in Africa. We have more than 500,000 black workers who have crossed our borders illegally to come and find work in this horrible place. Where do you get that from? It's absolute nonsense. It's disgusting the way my country has been maligned in this, in your media.
What do you think of the concept of majority rule, which would be, in your case, I guess, to mean with the
I
blacks?
fully support it.
You do?
We fully support it, but then we must be consistent. Then we must be consistent. We are not prepared to go and live under a system that cannot guarantee that to us, and you cannot guarantee it.
Well, now, what country today in Africa is not subscribing to majority rule that you're referring that we're not
Not a single one, except Botswana. There's not a single African country that has majority rule.
Well, and you're saying we're saying nothing about them.
Nothing.
Why say something about you?
No, well, not only do you say nothing about it, you know nothing about what is going on inside, and you couldn't care less.
Well, I don't, but I would presume somebody in our State Department
Well,
does.
then they never talk. You never hear them complain about them. You never hear them shouting about that kind of thing and atrocities and murders and all sort of other things that take place. But I don't say that we must come and start paralleling and comparing the negative sides of peoples and nations. We are not for that. We don't interfere in other people's affairs. We have problems. We have racial discrimination based on color, which I think ought to be removed. I cannot defend it. I cannot defend discrimination based on color for the sake of discrimination. I think no one can defend that as being morally correct. And we want to move away from it, and we have moved away from it, and we will move away from it.
Right.
But there's one thing we cannot do. We cannot move away from our land, our birthright, our language, our culture, our system. That we can't do. We can't be shot up into the sky and off to the moon. It's not possible.
And I think that's a very important point to reaffirm, that that is your land as much as America is mine.
Exactly.
As a matter of fact, your forebears have been there longer than mine probably were here. But there are still places today where blacks cannot buy a house in South Africa. Is that not correct?
Well, it
And
depends
cannot
how
work.
you look at it. I can't buy a house or land in the black homelands. They are protected. Their
They're-
business rights are protected.
As a white man, you cannot.
No, they are protected. Most whites with their bigger capital, skills and business expertise have been able to go in there and buy them out and quickly take over. These matters are never put to your public. It's a two-way street, not a one-way street.
Well, I think tonight we've had a two-way street. You've been frank, and we've enjoyed it. I
Thank
appreciate you. I would encourage you to not be apologetic about being frank and honest. The American people are hungry to hear other viewpoints. You may not think that, but I can speak for them. They do want to hear frankness and honesty and openness, and I think we welcome your forthrightness and would like to hear more. So,
Thank you so much.
Take advantage of our media and do it.
I will.
And maybe we should all go to South Africa ourselves and find out and see, and perhaps that would be the best way, but we can't, so you've heard one man's viewpoint, and I think well worth considering. We'll be right back.